I'm on parole in Texas until the year 2073. When I was laying on the floor with an AR-15 in my face and they're screaming, "Don't move," I didn't understand that these SWAT team coming in to get me weren't there to arrest me, they were there to rescue me. I learned the secret to life in a level 5 maximum security prison. Ready for it?
What does it take to rebuild a life? To rise from the ashes of addiction and rediscover purpose, meaning, and hope? I've walked that road myself. The principles that helped me recover didn't just save me, they reshaped how I live. Now I'm sitting down with guests from all walks of life to ask a bigger question. Could these same principles help anyone? Not just people battling addiction, but anyone who feels stuck, broken, or searching for something more. I'm Aaron Prager, and this is American Recovery.
Damon West, Mr. West, thank you for coming by. At the top of the order, just gotta say, I'm a huge fan of yours.
Dude, thanks, man.
A huge fan of yours, yeah. I got introduced to you about, actually, like pretty recently though, like a few months back. I mean, I got sober, back in 2016 myself, but I'm always looking.
What's your date?
June 4th, 2016, by the grace of God.
You'll never forget that, right?
Never,
July
never,
30,
never.
2008.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I know you have an amazing story. Like I've watched every angle of your story, and I was just like, I was enthralled by it. And the concept, which we'll get into later, of a coffee bean, revelatory, game changer.
Sure.
So I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of introduce yourself, where you came from, how you got to this chair, and like the TLDR version, and we'll obviously touch base on some of the bigger concepts as we go.
First of all, thank you for having me on your show. And then, man, thanks for that. Like, I'm still blown away that people even know who I am, because I just still think I'm this guy from Port Arthur, Texas. But the story's gotten bigger and bigger. And I think I'm a storyteller. And I think people have always learned from storytellers.
I feel like we are like that, though.
Yeah, lessons, morals, principles, entertainment, it's all come at the feet of storytellers. And I've become a pretty good storyteller. And my story has a lot of these elements that people really crave. Like, there's the underdog journey. We love the good underdog story. When the underdog wins, we win. We love stories about sports. Sports is like the one thing that brings us all together. But people really love true crime and prison stories. And that's where this story is. The best place to start this is probably, it's not even in childhood, but it's 16 years ago. The date is May 18th, 2009, to be exact. On May 18th, 2009, I'm standing in front of a jury in Dallas, and the jury has just sat through a 6-day organized crime trial. And I'm the head of an organized crime ring that operates throughout the entire city of Dallas. I'm the top criminals organization. We're a bunch of meth addicts that break into people's houses to steal for meth. Because, addicts, we want what we want when we want it. And we'll do anything we have to do to get it. And when I was in my addiction, I stole from people. I stole more than just their property. I stole their sense of security. My victims, they have something that's gone that they can't get back, and I can't give it back to them. But the jury heard the story about Damon West, this guy that grew up in Port Arthur, Texas, a little small town in Texas where football was king, and I was the star quarterback of my hometown. Great 2-parent home, good student growing up, in church every Sunday. Get to college, I'm a Division I starting quarterback at North Texas. Injuries derailed my career early on, and that's when the drugs come in. The cocaine, the ecstasy, the pills, because I'm an addict, man. I can't live life on life's terms, and when my identity was gone, I put in the chemicals to change the way I felt. But they heard about, the life after college. I went to work in Congress in Washington. I worked on Wall Street. And when I was a broker in Dallas in 2004, I got introduced to methamphetamines for the first time. And meth, man, the most evil, most destructive, most addictive drug ever created by man. I smoked it one time, and I was instantly hooked just like that. And then, I gave away everything for that drug, because that's what addicts do. We give things away. An addict gives up their goals to meet their behaviors. That's, to me, is the definition of addiction, right? When you give up a goal to meet a behavior, you're an addict. And it doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol. It could be food, money, clothing, shopping, sex, pornography, the internet, social media. The list goes on ad nauseum. When you give up goals to meet a behavior, you're an addict. And so that's what I did, man. I gave up all my goals in life. I became a criminal. I became a thief. And 3 years into this burglary ring, in 2008, the Dallas SWAT team takes me down. July 30th, 2008. Actually, the day I got sober was the day the SWAT team got me. As I tell people all the time, I got taken in sobriety at gunpoint. So, but that's the best place to start this journey, because that jury that day on May 18th, 2009, they're sitting across the courtroom from a guy that had it all but threw it all away around drugs and alcohol. And the jury is looking at a guy also that's unapologetic. I haven't owned any of my behaviors at this point. And on that date, on May 18, 2009, the jury came back with their verdict in 10 minutes. And that's a bad sign if you're
Real
a criminal
bad.
defendant. Oh yeah, I mean it means they smoked you. And on May 18, 2009, the judge read my sentence out loud. He said, Damon Joseph West, you are hereby sentenced to 65 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. 65 is a life sentence in Texas. The jury gave me life that day. First felony conviction ever. So that was what I was up against. I asked this question to a lot of groups I talked to. I said, if someone takes control of your life tomorrow, what's the first thing they would change? It's a very thought-provoking question, and the idea is that you really know the answer to that question. Then the question really becomes, why have you not already made the change yourself? And I think the answer lies in some form of fear, right? Fears of doubt, fears of failure, fears of accomplishment even.
Yeah.
But fear in the fact that growth is what's going to happen if you answer that question. And growth can be a scary thing because growth takes us outside of our comfort zone, but that's a great place to navigate towards, outside your comfort zone. And on May 18, 2009, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice did take control of my life. And I knew that the thing that had to change was me, but I had no clue how to make all that change.
Yeah. I didn't necessarily go the same route of like state-funded sabbatical in order to get into recovery and whatnot, but I did have my circumstances, my rock bottom, I guess you could call it, brought up to meet me where I'm at. My mother, God rest her soul, she had passed away, never got to see me sober. My father, on the other hand, he looked at me dead in the face and said, Aaron, I know what you're doing. Don't bring it around my family. I'll never forget him saying those words to me. You touched on fear. Fear, I feel like, is one of the great, not only whisperers of untruths to you, but they've actually come up with good acronyms to describe what fear actually is. And I know you have a great one, if you could share it with us.
Yeah, false evidence appearing real. I mean, that's what we talk about in the rooms all the time. But fear, in the big book, they say it's the number one offender, right? The resentments and fear are the number one offenders of everybody that's trying to get sober and trying to work a program recovery. Fears, man, they hold us back in life. These are big things.
What about for you? What were your biggest fears that kind of you needed to eventually get to a place where you could work through them?
Yeah, well,
because you've been through a lot. You've been through the judge, jury, smoking you in 10 minutes, into prison, all these different things, detoxing.
Yeah, the biggest fear I had to deal with, whenever I got sentenced to life in prison, was the idea that I'm about to go into a prison. I'm about to go to a level 5 maximum security prison in Texas. Level 5s are the highest security level there is, man. That's where they keep the worst of the worst, the biggest offenders in there. And in Texas, they have a law. This is the law I learned about. When you get a life sentence in Texas, you have to live with lifers. You don't live in a general population where they have people of varying sentences. You have to live with the hardest people in there because the lifers, 95% of that population never goes home again. It's the most hopeless place on earth. And that's the thing about prison that was so scary. The biggest fear for me is I'm walking to a place that has no hope. And hope is essential in life because if you don't have hope, you don't have anything. And that's when there's a void of hope, negativity, evil, darkness fills the void. And you don't have to be in a physical prison to be a world with no hope. There's a lot of places and a lot of people that are hopeless out there. But that's the thing about hope. It's a very dark place. And that's what I'm about to go into when I go to prison. My biggest fear is how do I survive this thing? My mom, right after the trial was over, my parents get one last little visit with me. And my mom uses that 5 minutes to tell me this ultimatum that you're not going to get in any gangs while you're in there. You're not getting any tattoos. She said, come back as the man we raised or don't come back at all. Wow. I don't know how I'm going to keep this promise to my mom, but I want to go home one day. It was revealed to me when I was in county jail waiting for the prison transport bus to come get me. I got about 2 months from the day of my sentencing to the day the bus gets me. That's about your time frame, And so I'm trying to get myself ready, mentally, physically. I don't know anything about spiritually yet. I haven't been introduced to that world. All I know is I'm scared to death, and that's when you start praying the most, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't really understand about the spiritual awakening that I was going to have later on when I got to prison. But I run into this old black Muslim guy in Dallas County Jail. His name was Muhammad. And Muhammad, he couldn't be more different than me if possible, right? He's older, I'm younger. He's black, I'm white. He's a Muslim, I'm a Christian. We have nothing in common except that we're human. But sometimes that's the only thing you need in common. In fact, I would argue most of the time, that's what you need. But Muhammad sees that I'm struggling with this whole idea of going to prison. He's a career criminal, been out of prison his whole life. And he explains to me the dynamic of prison, that it's going to be the hardest thing I've ever been through, the most violent introduction I've ever seen in my life. Prison's all about race. And he's telling me you're going to fight the white gangs first, you'll fight the black gangs next, and then you'll earn the right to walk alone. He's telling me things like you don't have to win all your fights, but you got to fight all your fights. But then he shares with me this allegory. Aaron, is one of the most amazing messages I've ever heard in my life. And he shares with me about the story of the coffee bean. He said, Imagine prison as a pot of boiling water. You have 3 choices how to respond to this pot of boiling water. He said you can be like a carrot that goes in hard but becomes soft under the water. You can be like an egg that goes in with the soft inside, but inside that water, the inside, the yolk, the heart can become hardened. Or you can be like a coffee bean that changes the water to coffee. He said the coffee bean's the only thing that changes the water. It's the change agent. He said if you want to come back as someone your parents recognize, you have to be like the coffee bean. You have to change the water around you with the power inside of you. And man, that was the first time that I ever had a little glimmer of hope as I'm going to this situation. I'm waiting for the prison bus to come get me, because that little hope that if the power's truly inside me, then that means the power's not in the world around me, right? The criminal justice system, the guards, the inmates, it's in me. And it's one of the messages I share with audiences all over the world, that the power's inside you. It's not what goes on in the towns you come from, the state you live in, the crazy politics and social problems this country has right now, social media. There's no power there. The power is in you. And if you keep the power inside you, you don't survive adversity, you thrive in adversity. And so the coffee bean message was the first glimmer of hope that I had going into this situation, that the fears may not be real. And I've learned since then that most of our fears never come true. Like, I don't know what the percentage is, but in my life, it's like 85% of the things I fear and worry about never even happen, right?
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time, and time, the most precious resource there is. Once this stuff is gone, it's gone for good. And all the money in the world can't buy one more second of time. We spend a lot of time wasted on fears that never come true.
So today I want to, thank you for sharing that, by the way. And I encourage everybody to you've told your story like in depth, 3 hours long, like, or however long it was on a couple other channels. So I encourage everybody to check that out as well. But today I really want to focus in, because I feel like you have such expertise, like going through all these different things, all these different events in your life that have led you to this chair right now. And I want to talk to you about the concept of inventory and needing to take inventory. And for some people who don't know what it is, can you just break this down for them as concisely as you can, the idea of taking a moral inventory?
So when I got to prison, I had to establish myself in there, and that took a little while. And in prisons like that, the only language everybody speaks is violence. And you become very fluent in violence. Either someone speaks it to you or you speak it to them, but you have to learn the language of violence. And that takes us outside of our peace. But once I got established in there and I didn't have to fight anymore, the violence is finally, the threat to my physical safety had been removed. That's when the real work began. That's when I had to work on the inside part. And that was the toughest part. The first thing I had to do was surrender. I had to surrender this idea of control. And I didn't understand surrender until I walked into I got into recovery. I got into a 12-step program recovery called AA. Now, I don't speak for AA. I'm not a spokesperson for AA. It happens to be the program recovery that I got into, and I still work to this day. But as a person that goes to these meetings, I started going to these meetings in prison, and I started getting the answers to my questions. And surrender is like the first 3 steps of the 12 steps is when we have to surrender. We have to find our higher power. I'm a Christian, so mine's Christ, but everybody can pick whatever their higher power is. But you admit things to yourself too, like that you're powerless over this drugs or alcohol, whatever it is that's holding you back, and that your life has become unmanageable. And the only way to find, peace in this world and serenity is to surrender to a higher power and let the higher power take over. And so when that finally happened, that's when that spiritual awakening I was talking about finally happened. And when this happened, I started going to these meetings, and I realized that there were some things holding me back, these resentments I have. Like I told you a while ago, resentments are one of the biggest offenders that we have. Because if I have a resentment against a person, a place, or a thing, that can cause me to go back out and get drunk or high again, because you can use that as an excuse for why I need to put a chemical in.
The relapse before the relapse.
Absolutely, man. And we all relapse in our mind before we relapse physically. I've never had a physical relapse, but I understand relapse enough to understand it happens in your thinking first. Your thinking is everything.
Yeah.
And if you want to change the things you do, you have to change the way you think. Your old thinking can't take you to new places.
My emotional sobriety is probably going to get shattered way before my physical sobriety is going to get shattered.
Absolutely, because your feelings are involved. When you say emotional sobriety, this is your feelings, man. This is your the things that make you at your core. And a personal inventory really works at the core of your resentments, your fears, your doubts. Why do we have these things? And when I got into the 12 steps, I learned in the 4th step of the 12 steps is to work a personal inventory. And so I found out about these 3 basic instincts in life. And in all human beings and all of humanity, there are 3 core instincts that drive all of our behavior. Social, the need to fit into society, the need to be part of something bigger. That's one of our basic instincts in life. security, the need to be able to be secure in your finances and be able to provide for your family. These are the security instinct in life, and the need for sex. And I don't mean sex in a promiscuous way. I mean sex in the idea that, you want to meet a partner one day and have a family. You want to have a healthy sexual relationship with another human being. Social, security, sex. These are the three basic instincts that control all of our behavior is tied to one of the three of those things. I didn't fully understand that when I read it in the big book, but I came to my sponsor one day, my sponsor in prison, we'll call him Ray. We'll protect his anonymity, right? I go to him one day in the Chapel of Hope. That's the prison chapel. And I was telling him about this resentment I had for the judge in my case. The judge was a guy named Judge Snipes. Now, before Judge Snipes was Judge Snipes for my criminal trial, he was a guy I knew as Colonel Snipes. And he was a guy that we used to hang in the same social circles with, right? So we would go out and we would be in the same place together, we'd drink together. The last time I saw him before I ended up in his courtroom was 4 years before, in 2004, when his dad passed away and I bought him a shot at the bar, And then I walk into his courtroom and he handles me really rough. And Aaron, I expected, I had an expectation on this other human being to treat me different. And that's another thing about life. You shouldn't put expectations on people because that will most of the time fail.
In fact, I find that the more expectations I have, or I should say like this, my level of serenity is inversely proportionate to my expectations.
Yeah, exactly. It's like these things are connected, right? Yeah. So if your expectations are low, your serenity is probably pretty high because you don't stress about why does this person not meet my expectations, because people rarely meet the expectations that you put on them, and it's not their job to meet your expectations, by the way.
Yeah.
Just like other people's opinions of you are none of your business. So I'm in this meeting.
I'm just laughing because I know so many people who need to hear this.
So we'll play this for them. So I'm in this meeting and I'm telling Ray about this thing. At this point in prison, I'm trying to fight my case, and Judge Snipes is fighting me from coming back in and appealing my case. But he makes a big error because he lies to the Court of Criminal Appeals, and my lawyer catches him, and Snipes has to be removed from my case. And so I go into the chapel that day, and I'm just smug. And I tell Ray, I got him. He said, who do you have? I said, I got Judge Snipes. I finally got him. He made a big mistake, and he got thrown off my case. I was right the whole time, Ray. The guy had it in for me. He said, isn't it nice to sit on your throne and just sit there and judge other people? And I'm like, what do you mean, man? I didn't do anything to this guy. He did this to me. I'm the victim. He said, haven't you ever done someone wrong and you wanted them to forgive you? Forgiveness is a two-way street, Damon. You have to forgive everybody for everything they do to you, especially when they don't ask for it, especially when they offend you. And I'm like, Ray, I don't know if I can forgive this guy, man. I don't know if I can let go of this resentment. He said, then we need to work a personal inventory because you're going to lose your recovery over this. I'm like, Ray, I'm not about to get drunk or high over this. He said, yes, you will. He says, come to the board with me. So he draws 3 columns on the board. In each column, he has social, security, and sex. And then on the left side of the board, he writes in my resentment to Judge Snipes. He said, so he tells me about the basic instincts. He said, so let's see if Snipes touches any of these instincts. He said, does your resentment of Judge Snipes touch your social instinct? I said, yeah, man, I'm an ex-con. Being an ex-con is going to be hard in life. Who wants to be around ex-cons? He said, well, then put a check there. So I put a check there. He said, does your resentment of Judge Snipes affect your security instinct? Yeah, I'm an ex-con, man. How many jobs are going to be available to an ex-con? I'll never be able to provide for my family. Yes, it totally does. He said, well, put a check in that one too. I'll put another check on the board. I've got the chalk, right? He said, does your resentment of Snipes affect your sexual instinct? Yeah, I'm an ex-con. Who wants to be with an ex-con? There's going to be a limited number of partners I could even be with in life because I'm an ex-con. People won't want to be no woman wants to be with me. He said, man, put a check on that one too. He said, no wonder why your resentment of Snipes is so strong. It touches all 3 of these instincts. And he paused for a second. He said, but there is a 4th column that I forgot to tell you about. And so he takes the chalk from me and he goes and writes in the 4th column, what role do I play?
What is your?
Then he hands me the chalk. He said, now I want you to go up there and write the role that you play in your problem with Snipes. He said, because the role that we play is what we're always searching for in the personal inventory. So I'll go up there and I could feel my resentment slipping away, Aaron. And I didn't like it, but it was slipping away. And so I write in there, I was a drug addict, I was a criminal, I was a thief, I broke the social contract, I stole people's property, I violated people's, the sanctity of their home. I did all these things, and one day I walked into a courtroom, Criminal District Court 7, and Judge Snipes' name was in that courtroom. So I did all the things that brought me into Snipes' world. Before Snipes could do any of these things to me in my mind, I already was the one that caused all this to happen.
Well, this is kind of like leading us perfectly into the next thing, which is, what was your initial reaction when confronted with the task of looking at yourself? Because on one hand, it seems it's like, well, I got to look at myself and I just don't want to do the action to begin with. But on the other hand, it's like, what may I find down there?
I didn't want to look into myself. I didn't want to look.
Well, we don't want to in general, especially as addicts and alcoholics, but most people on earth don't want to look at. They want to blame that, and the other.
Absolutely, because that's comfortable. That's a place where we can sit on our thrones and just judge other people, right?
Yeah.
We can just sit there and lob daggers at people. But like I said, I could feel something inside me slipping away when I'm writing all this stuff on the board about what role do I play. And Ray, to his credit, he understood. He's been in this moment before where he's sponsored other people and he's worked the fourth step with them, the inventory. And he let it sink in. He said, listen, he said, if you don't do all these things, then Snipes doesn't have the power to do any of those other things to you. So your problem with Snipes is really your problem. You're the one that did all this. And so you have to let your resentment of Snipes go. And now you have to deal internally with how you feel about yourself, because that's what was going on. The resentment shifted from Snipes to me. And we don't want that. We don't want the resentment to shift.
It's uncomfortable. It's icky.
Yeah, and you gotta forgive yourself. You gotta let that go. And that's the thing he was saying. He said, look, we have no idea why Snipes did the things he did to you, but you don't control Snipes. He said, in life, all we are trying to do is keep our side of the street clean. And you can't clean anybody else's side of the street. The only way to keep our side of the street clean is to work a personal inventory all the time, not just that day that we're working the steps, but run every resentment, every fear, every doubt you have through this personal inventory, find the role you play. Because he said, then, if you can find the role you play, that's the one thing you control, that's the one thing you can change, that's the one thing you can overcome.
What about for yourself, though? When you were going through this, was there any fear or hesitation at the start of it?
No, I had no expectations, though. I had no expectation that
Did you have the gift of desperation?
Yeah, I had no expectation I was gonna be letting my resentment of Snipes go. I went into the Chapel of Hope that day thinking, man, I got this guy. Finally I'm justified now, and I was smug about it. I had no expectation that he pulled the rug out of me from under me that day, and let me tell you this, I've come to the personal inventory in the book several times, and I've read about the three instincts in life and all that. It never dawned on me, it never hit me about what that really meant until I actually worked the step with another human being. And that's why it's so important, Aaron. It's so important for us to have another human being, in my case, a sponsor. And anybody that works at Program Recovery, they have a sponsor to have this conversation out loud. Because the problem is, when we get inside of our heads, and we have this conversation inside of our heads, we can justify anything.
Well, it's the most depressing and dark place, at least for me, and I'll keep it on myself there, is the place between my ears.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm simultaneously the greatest and the worst thing since the invention of stepping on Legos in the dark. It's like, that's just how I am. But I mean, you've done a lot of shows before, and on Ed Milet, you had a quote that said, the other side of your fear and adversity is the best version of you.
That's it, man. That's it. That's the thing. And Ed had an eloquent way of saying that, but on the other side of adversity is the best version of us, but we have to go through the adversity to meet the best version of us. You can't sit on the side of adversity and say, well, I want to be that guy over there, without going through the adversity. But what we find out when we go through adversity is that my dad had this saying. He said, Damon, do things you're afraid of so you can do things you're afraid of. The more you do things you're afraid of, the more you conquer your fears, the more fears you're going to be able to conquer. And so that's what my life became in prison. I started going on the other side of the adversity, because prison is all about adversity. And prison's hard. It's a punishment. By design, it's hard. But it's all the stuff that's not on the brochure that's really the hardest part of prison, right? Somebody told me one time in prison, it was profound, Aaron. Prison is the only place where you're never alone, but you're always lonely. You're always around other people, not the right people. And that's what makes you lonely. You're not around the people you want to be around, but you're never alone. You're never alone in your own thoughts. Yeah. It's a very hard place to live in.
And flip. I'm just like, as I'm hearing you say that, like, it's almost like in the book that you're talking about of what is it, Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about there's the bedevilments and there's the promises. It's almost the inverse of it. And it's sort of the opposite with prison. And if you start living a life along spiritual principles, it's where instead of, oh, I'm always lonely, I'm never alone, but I'm always lonely. Now I could be, because that was me. Like, that was me whether I was with people or whatever, but now I can go out there and I cannot be around anybody, but I don't feel like I'm alone anymore.
Absolutely. You have serenity, and that's what we want. One of the other things, too, that I learned from Ray, and he's still my sponsor this day, the Serenity prayer. It's this beautiful prayer that we start off all these meetings with, that God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So he diagrams a prayer one day in prison for us. The whole chapel. We're sitting there in there. He has a chalkboard. He draws a line from one side of the chalkboard to the other. He calls that line God's line. He said God's line is bigger than the chalkboard. It's infinitely long. He says the first part of the prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. He said the things you can't change are on God's line. And every time you try to touch someone on God's line, you hurt yourself and you hurt other people because you're not God. God doesn't need your help doing his job. He said, stay off of God's line. You get your own line in life. He erases a little inch out of God's line, held his fingers up an inch apart. The whole chapel's looking at these little inch. He said, if God's line's infinitely long, that's your line. You got 1 inch. He said that little 1 inch line was called humility. He said humility is being right-sized. And when we're right-sized, we can be useful to other people again. He says the second part of the prayer, the courage to change the things I can. He said the things you can change on your line, there's 4 things you can change in your life every day. These are the 4 things your higher power gives you to control. What you think, what you say, what you feel, and what you do. What you think, what you say, what you feel, and what you do. He said if it's not one of those 4 things, you have no control over it. He said the world goes on around you. You can't control the world around you, but you can control the world inside you. He said the last part of the prayer was the most important part of the prayer, the wisdom to know the difference between the big line and your little line. I get so hung up on this too, because I'm into spiritual progress.
I feel like a lot of people do.
Oh yeah, I'm into spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. I mess this up all the time. But inevitably, in life, every single day, I've come up to decisions in life where I got to ask myself, Damon, is that on your line? And man, a lot of times I can recognize and say it's not on my line, and I walk away. So much pain, hurt, suffering, loss, lack of serenity has been saved in life by knowing what's on my line and what's on my higher power's line. And in prison, once I learned that diagram, the Serenity prayer, then I was able to focus my time, my energy, my attention on the things I could really actually impact and change. What I think, what I say, what I feel, and what I do. And I quit wasting time on things I had no impact on. And that's a big thing. Whether you're in a physical prison, whether you're in a prison in your mind out here. By the way, I meet more people out in the free world that are locked up than I ever did when I served time in real prison. Yeah. More people are in prison by their thoughts and by their things than by steel bars and barbed wire and concrete combined.
Absolutely. So walk us through how you approached kind of purging yourself of this. Because that's what it sounds like, really. Like you're like, okay, I got this stuff in. Ray's telling you we're at the spot. You're identifying, what your parts are in things. But how did you approach this? And what ultimately were tools that you had to use to kind of get you through that moment?
Great question. I learned the secret to life in a level 5 maximum security prison. You ready for it? The secret to life is servant leadership. Servant leadership is helping other people reach their goals in life, helping to raise other people to a different station in life. Because when we help other people grow, we grow. Serving other people, that's the key to everything. Like when I was in prison, I went in as a guy that's an addict, right? And addiction's the most selfish thing in the world. You know this, Aaron. We want what we want when we want it. We'll do anything to get it. I broke into people's houses, man. I'm no better than anybody else that's ever lived in addiction. And again, it doesn't have to be the addiction to drugs or alcohol. It can be any addiction if you're listening to this. But to be in recovery, you become selfless versus selfish. And so when I started working this program recovery, and I really bought in to the tenets that AA was teaching, the principles, the steps, I started figuring out, hey, if I'm going to turn this thing around, if I'm going to really turn this thing around, I got to learn how to serve these men around me. I got to figure out a service work project, because that's what Ray would harp on. He said, people that have recovery and they hold on to serenity and they keep their sobriety, it's because they learn how to get outside themselves and serve other people. He said this one day in a meeting. He said, if we could all throw our problems onto a pile, and then we could all walk up to that pile and we could grab anybody's problem, he said, chances are very good you'll grab your own problem, put it back over your shoulder when you see what other people are carrying around. So he said in life, when you feel like you're going through something difficult, go serve someone else, help them out of their problem, pulls you out of yours too, right? It gives you a purpose for that day. And so I came up with this prayer, and it's really a 3rd-step prayer, and it's the same prayer I've been praying ever since 2011 when I got to this program recovery. I said it this morning when I woke up in San Diego. I get up in the morning and say, hey, God, put in front of me what you need me to do today for you, and let me recognize it when I see it, because I don't want to miss whatever that thing is. Amen. That's it, man. That's all I prayed for in prison. And so my service work project, the first service work project is I'm trying to figure out how to turn this pot of boiling water into a pot of coffee. And that's not a job for one man to do in a level 5 prison. I need these other guys to buy into it. But again, it's a very negative environment. So I started thinking about what do I have in life that I could share with other people? And I'm in prison, right? And so the answer came to me because I had a very privileged life. I had a bachelor's degree when I went to prison. Most of these guys are locked up with their education stopped somewhere in junior high, maybe early high school. So I was like, that's it. I'm going to transfer my education to these guys around me. They didn't have the opportunity to have an education like I did. So I opened a free tutoring service. I started teaching guys how to read and write. I get them ready for the GED test. So if they ever got out of prison one day, they could be a better husband or a better father. And once I started serving these men, they started serving each other. They would come up to me all the time with these guys taking my classes. Hey man, how do I pay you for this? Because in prison, everything has a price on it. Yeah. You can't take anything for free in there. You don't want to pay the price for something for free, by the way. So in prison, everything is transactional. So these guys would be like, listen man, you're teaching me how to read and write. I got to pay you something. And that's what I taught them about. Don't pay it back, pay it forward. Find someone else around you in need, because the truth is, Aaron, everybody's coming in need of something. And when we can look for the needs of other people, my prayer, put in front of me what you need me to do today for you, God. He'll send you people in need. Yeah. And that's what I told these guys. Look for someone in need, help that person out. That's how you pay me back. You pay it forward to someone else. And that's what happened in prison. The entire culture in prison shifted from this negative, selfish environment to this group think of how do we serve each other? How do we all help each other out? They bought into the whole coffee bean thing. And that's what Parole ultimately realized. In 2015, it was crazy, man. I was working in the chapel in prison. I was a chapel clerk. And I'll never forget that day in 2015. Chaplain Vance, the prison chaplain, came in that day to work. He was so excited too, Aaron. He said, hey, Wes, they're looking for you. I was like, who? He said, the parole board. Security's here to get you. They're going to take you to your parole interview. Now, parole is the dream of every man and woman in prison, Aaron. That's your only way out of prison.
Especially where you were.
Oh yeah, well I can't serve all my time. I mean, I'll be 98 when my time is over, right? So the only way out for me is parole. And I know I'm up for parole, but I don't think I can make the first parole. In fact, very few people have ever made their first parole in a life sentence. It's 7 years, you know. I figure I'm gonna do about 10 or 15. I pull a dime, maybe a dime and a nickel on this thing. So I go to the parole office that day, and I have this fear coming over me, and I stop and I pray. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Talk to God. You know, hey God, I'm not going to control what's going to go in that room. I can control what comes out of my mouth. I'll take care of that. You got the rest of this. And that's that peace that comes from that program recovery, that serenity. I was able to compose myself before I go into the biggest interview of my life, the biggest sales pitch I'll ever make to the parole board. But I knew that I could only control the words coming out of my mouth. I can't control the decision that these people make. So I go in there and I'm calm. Lady for parole said, have a seat, Mr. West, sit down. So I sit down in front of her, and she's going through my file, and she gets to all my AA sign-in sheets. She said, man, you've been very active while you were in prison. You've been working your program recovery. I said, yes, ma'am, I have. She said, what's the 8th step in your 12 steps? So she knows this stuff, right? You can't play with these people. I said, that's when you make a list of all the people you harm, and you become willing to make the amends. And she said, yes, it is. And she said, the 9th step is when you go out and make the amends. She said, but you can't make amends. You know that, right? You can't apologize to your victims. In Texas, it's a law. You can't apologize to the victim of a crime. It's a felony in Texas. They'll send you back to prison if you apologize to your victims. Oh. She said, so what's your plan for that? And, you know, because I worked my program, I knew about what's called a living amends. And in the 9th step, the 9th step says is you're willing to make the amends, except when to do so would cause you or the other person harm. And I said, we have this thing called a living amends. And a living amends is when we go out and do good deeds and we expect nothing in return. And that's how we work off the amends that we can't make in life.
So it's interesting because it's an amazing story, and I don't want to interrupt you because it's like you tell it with such passion, and people need to hear that like you could go from one place of almost like pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization and get to a place where now you're like, actually, I'm going to go try to be of service to people. But that started in that process. That's why I'm going to come back to inventory now, is that process of, you know, just like any business, you know, it'll go out of business if it's not taking a regular inventory.
Yeah, if you don't know what's on your shelves, you're going to go out of business.
And the same thing with us, you know, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, sometimes even physically too. It's like we got to take a look at what's inside. And so walk us through, how did you get, like, how did your mind start to shift post taking that inventory? Were you still in prison when you did that?
I guess the best way to explain it, Aaron, is I was free long before I ever walked out of a prison. Like spiritually, emotionally, mentally, I'd already been freed. My body was still in prison, but I was already freed on the inside.
Of what?
Well, because I stopped looking at prison as a punishment. I started looking at prison as an opportunity. Every day I got up with this incredible attitude, like, this is great. I got 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to work on me. Of course I want to be free physically, but I don't control that yet. And my biggest chance at having an impact on that part of the physical freedom was this parole interview in 2015. It's my first shot to even, like, can I become a free man again physically? But I lived my life in prison. I had a smile on my face everywhere I went. Being a coffee bean, that's one of the things about being a coffee bean is your body language. Your body language is powerful, man. Whatever kind of energy you put out, you attract back. Energy's a real thing, And if you put out negative energy, you'll attract negative energy. It's the law of attraction. And so I would always try to attract the positive energy. And this lady felt that day. She's like, she's going over this stuff. She's like, it's remarkable. You didn't just change yourself when you're in this prison. You changed the whole prison around you. So she notices all the stuff that's happened, the tutoring, everything else. She knows that. It's in this file, And the answer to your question was the question she asked me. She said, listen, we're going to break this down to a 1-question test. She said, the answer to this question determines whether or not you're going to go home or you stay in prison. She said, but the answer to my question is not your prison file. She said, I can't find it in there anywhere. She said, here's the question. She said, if you could be remembered for being anything in life, anything at all, she said, tell me what that one thing would be, but give it to me in just one word. Go. I didn't have to think about the one word. I've been working my one word. I've been living my one word because I worked at Program Recovery every single day once I started learning it in 2011. The one word I gave her that day, useful. Remember that word from the Serenity prayer, the diagram Serenity prayer? When we can become useful to other people again, that's humility. Humility brings us to a place where we are useful again, And that's what I told that lady. I said, I just want to be useful. And I said, look, I worked this Program Recovery. I'll work it in here. I'm going to work it out there. I just want to be useful. And I can be useful in prison or I can be useful in the free world again. And on November 16th, 2015, they let me go. They walked me out of prison that day. And now, I'm not a free man. And that's the trick about it. I've got a little more time left on parole. I'm on parole in Texas until the year 2073. So I got a little more time left on parole. And I signed a substance abuse parole certificate. This is the hardest parole they have in Texas. Substance abuse parole certificate. All right. One of the things you sign off on is that you're going to take a drug and alcohol test every single month the whole time you're on parole. If you fail one test for drugs or alcohol, you go back and work on your sentence again. One test. I do one of these every single month for the next 48. I got 48 more years. I started with 58 years. So I'm chipping away at this thing. But I can't go into a bar or a club the rest of my life. Now in Texas, the way you tell if it's a bar or a club is they have signs on doors that say 51%. Some states have them too. A 51% sign means that establishment they make 51% of their income off of liquor or beer sales. Now, the signs in Texas are there for people that are packing those concealed handguns. They don't want you bringing a concealed handgun to a place that makes 51% of their sales from liquor or beer. You don't want people drinking with guns, right?
Don't mix.
So, in my life, I can't go into a bar or a club. It's a violation of my parole. Now, my parole officers told me if you don't see a 51% sign and you walk into a place, if you see that the bar area is bigger than the restaurant area, it's probably a bar. Don't go in. So I've got rules on me, man. I can't get arrested for anything. I can't get in trouble. But again, I'm not worried about being on parole because I'm in a program of recovery. I work my steps all the time. I've got a sponsor. I've got tools to live my life by.
For someone who, because this eventually becomes about working with people. It eventually becomes working with people, similar to I know you were going to say the word useful. You just want to be useful because that's all I wanted to be useful.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted. I wanted to find purpose. I want to do that.
Every human being wants that.
Everybody does. I even took it a little bit step farther, and I get flack for it sometimes where people go, "Oh, what's the meaning of life?" That little hokey question. I say it's to find your purpose.
Yeah.
That's the closest answer I got, at least.
That's a great answer.
And I don't think it's just for people who are, addicts. I think it's, I walk around sometimes saying I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic, because I'm recovered from a hopeless state of body and mind. How I got recovered from a hopeless state of body and mind was a huge part of that due to the fact of purging a lot of this BS that was inside of me. And just like you were talking about, you start to understand your resentments, your sexual inventory, your harms list, all these different things. But in the process, you start to gain an identity. You start to understand, push away all of the things that was messing Aaron up in his life. And now I get to see who Aaron truly is. And the funny thing with that too is I look at, some of the activities I used to engage in. I hate doing it now that I'm sober. But some of the things that I really hated doing when I was drunk and high, I very much enjoy doing sober now.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my new life. So for someone who feels overwhelmed at the idea of, examining their past, because most people do, it's very uncomfortable, you don't want to do it, really at all. What advice would you give to them to make this feel less intimidating?
Yeah, it's a mirror. You got to turn the mirror around and look in the mirror. And that's an uncomfortable thing. It's like the question I asked: if someone took control of your life tomorrow, what's the first thing they would change? That's the big deep dive into your past, right? Mm-hmm. Because then you're going to figure out what holds you back. What are these things? What are these fears, your resentments, and doubts? Here's the thing that I think people run into that hold them back is that when they look inside themselves and they do a really big self-introspection, they're not going to like what they see, because a lot of us are carrying around this baggage in our lives, and we don't ever get rid of that baggage. That's why Ray used the term, keep our side of the street clean. A program of recovery, I think every human being should work a program of recovery, the 12 steps. Even if you're not a drug addict or an alcoholic, it doesn't matter. You've got some kind of issues that may be holding you back in life. And by the way, working the personal inventory is a great practice for any human being. I think every human being should do it. I mean, in fact, we'll talk about this more in a little bit. I wrote a book about it just so everybody that's not a drug addict or alcoholic can work the 12 steps. But when Ray talks about keeping our side of the street clean, the only way to do that is to go out and clean this garbage out of you. One of the most important jobs in society is a garbage man, a sanitation worker. If all the garbage men in America decided tomorrow they're going to go on strike and lay it down, they're not picking up garbage anymore, how long before society breaks down? A month? 2 months? How long before people decide they're not going to live in a world where trash is overflowing in their streets and you can't even see the houses because trash is piled so high? You are your own sanitation worker in life. No one can take your trash out but you. But you have to do that. I think it scares people a lot because you have to confront a lot of stuff in life. But here's the deal. Once you confront it and you deal with it, you can put it aside. You can move forward in life. It's the only way to move forward.
So what do you think about taking an inventory of your past actions and emotion? What about it is so critical for someone who's trying to break free from a lot of these destructive patterns?
So I think that it's this idea, like I told you, what you think, what you say, what you feel, and what you do.
Yeah.
So you're not really working in those four things if you haven't taken control of your past, right? Because then these fears come in, these problems come in, these resentments that you haven't worked through, clouds your judgment, makes you make bad decisions based on bad information. If you're trying to make a decision about something and you're not using the right data, you're going to make the wrong decision, right? You put the wrong data into an answer, you come up with the wrong answer. And so we have to come up with the right solution. Like when I'm dealing with something in life, for example, I got out of prison and Ray is my sponsor when I get out of prison. And he says, look, I'll be your sponsor on 2 conditions. One is that you'll go to any length I tell you to stay sober. And 2, if you ever have a thought of drinking or doing drugs, you'll call me first.
The person who took me, my mentor in my recovery process, he had me sign the inside of a workbook that we use, and he had me put my date and he put my time, and he said, every time that you don't want to do something, I'm going to have you open up the book and you're going to look at that. Because you said at this date and time that you were willing to go to any lengths to stay sober and to do these things. And believe you me, when I hit that inventory process, I dragged my foot.
Did you ever have an experience where you were thinking about drinking or doing drugs again?
For the most part, I was very much given the gift of desperation, as a lot of people will kind of know about it. I was the car that crossed the finish line with one wheel on, the hood was blown off, like the gas tank's about to explode. I weighed 93 pounds when I got sober.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I had a lot of fear, I had a lot of resentments, a lot of thoughts of drinking early on. But what I came to realize is that it was a derivative of something else. A lot of my personal stuff that was inside, similar to how you've talked about in the past. And the whole that concept of being a coffee being in general is rather than letting the outside world affect me, things aren't just happening to me. It's not about me, but I have the power to change the things around me. How does this exactly play into the metaphor of a coffee bean, having to get right with yourself?
Yeah. So the idea is this, like in recovery, in my recovery, I'll use I statements because I can't talk about anybody else's recovery. I've learned that this addiction thing that I have, this addiction to drugs and alcohol, it's a thinking problem. And addiction, what I believe, addiction is a 3-part process. You have a thought that will become an obsession, then it'll become something physical you put in. Thought, obsession, physical. And this is why Ray is telling me, if you ever have a thought, you need to call me, because that thought can become something that just takes over in your brain. You obsess over it until you put in one day. I did have an urge to drink. This happened about 13 months out of prison. I was at a party, a Christmas party with my friend and his wife. My friend's wife was drinking a glass of wine, and this glass of wine smelled good, Aaron. I could smell the grapes in this thing. I'm about 2 feet from this lady. And I thought to myself, you know what, Damon, get a glass of wine. You earned it, you've deserved it. You know, all this time, look at your life now. And man, as soon as I thought it, I thought to myself, wait a second, I can't drink wine. I'm in trouble. So I leave the party, I call Ray on the phone. I was like, hey Ray, man, I was at this party, I had these, this thought about this urge to drink a glass of wine. He said, well, you did right. You used your first tool in a program of recovery, which is to call somebody. That's why I wanted you to call somebody. He said, your next tool is called playing the tape out all the way to the end. He said, for this tool to work, he said, I want you to imagine you're back at that party and you're having that glass of wine. He said, you're drinking the wine? I said, yeah, I'm drinking the wine. He said, good, now that we're drinking again, let's drink what you drank in the world. What was your favorite drink? I was like, bourbon. I was a big bourbon guy, Aaron. He said, well, good, drink your bourbon. He said, how's the bourbon taste? I said, it tastes good, man. He said, now let's do some drugs. Now that we're drinking bourbon again, what drugs would you do? I said, well, cocaine, because cocaine and bourbon go together really well.
I mean, drugs, that's what always people say. They're like, oh, because you don't do drugs anymore, can you do it? I'm like, well, you know what goes really good with alcohol? Drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what he's saying. He said, yeah, and I said, cocaine. He said, yes, they do. Cocaine and bourbon go together great. He said, so snort your coke. He said, you snorting it? I said, yeah, I'm snorting it. He said, Damon, now that we're doing drugs again, let's get to the good stuff. He said, what was the drug of choice in your world? What was the drug that did you in your story? It wasn't cocaine, was it? I said, no, it was meth. He said, that's right. You were a meth head. He said, so smoke your meth. That's how you did it, right? You smoked it? I was like, yeah, I smoked it. He said, well, smoke your meth. He said, you smoking it? I said, yeah, I'm smoking it. He said, good. He said, how's parole working out for you? I was like, man, I didn't think about parole. He said, we don't think about those things like that. When we're in our addiction and we're given into the craving, we don't think about our security, our family, our friends, our jobs. We give up our goals to meet our behaviors. That's the first time I learned that phrase so solidly. He said, you just gave up yours. He said, so what did parole would tell you would happen if you couldn't obey the rules? I said, I have to go back to prison and finish my sentence. He said, where are you now? I said, I'm on the prison bus, Ray. I'm chained up to another human being. I destroyed my family's life, destroyed my life again. He said, yeah, you have. He said, now you're going to be hungry after that long bus ride. Those bus rides to prison, you're starving by the time you get to prison, you know? He says, I want you to imagine you're back at prison. You're walking down the hallway. You got your mattress. You got your bags. Go to your cell. Throw your mattress and your bags down in your cell. Get to the chow hall for the last meal of the day. He said, what was the worst meal they ever served you in prison? I was like, pork noodle casserole. No one knows what's in pork noodle casserole. It's just slop, Aaron.
Yeah.
He said, go to the chow hall, get you a big bowl of pork noodle casserole, sit down at that metal table in the chow hall, and eat that pork noodle casserole and wash it down with that glass of wine you want to have tonight. Because that's where the glass of wine's going to take you. Back to the chow hall eating pork noodle casserole. He said, do you have it? Do you understand what I'm saying? I said, yeah, I got it. He said, good. He said, go back to the party, have a good time with your friends. If you ever need me again, call me. I'll be here for you. I went to the party. I had a good time. I've never had a thought of drinking or doing drugs again. I'm giving you that to illustrate this, is that one, you have to have the right tool for the job in life. Program recovery gives you tools. It's like the Abraham Maslow quote. If the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When I was in my addiction, I had a big hammer and I hit everything with it, man. But it didn't fix my problems. It made some of my problems worse, as a matter of fact. Now, the other part, the reason I'm telling you this, is that someone that has issues to deal with addiction of any kind, not just drugs and alcohol, food, money, clothing, shopping, sex, pornography, remember the list goes on ad nauseum. Sometimes in life, you need more than your faith to get through something like that. Faith is important. I'm a Christian. My Christian faith is so important to me. But if you're like me and you've got this disease of addiction, you have a thinking problem, you need more than faith. You need a program recovery that runs parallel to your faith. They work together, right? They don't have to be separate. There's not a war going on between recovery and faith. They work parallel with each other. Here's the thing, I'm Catholic. So what if I go up to my priest one day and say, hey, Father, I'm having these thoughts of drinking and doing drugs, these cravings, man, I can't shake them. You know what he's going to tell me to do? Pray. Because that's what he's trained to do. Pray. And prayer is great, man. But if being a Christian and praying were all it took to keep you sober, there'd be no Christian addicts out there. So you have to, in my opinion, if you're an addict like me, you have to have a program recovery. I don't know what your program recovery is, but you got to find your program.
I mean, for someone struggling, who's out there right now, how can them taking an inventory of themselves, looking inside, examining, how can that help them become what you like to call a coffee bean in the world?
It's the only way to set yourself free. And that's the personal inventory is, there's a lot of people in recovery that will say the first step's the most important step because it's the one you have to work every day. You have to surrender, But I think the fourth step is the one I work the most often because I'm always trying to plug in. When something happens in my life, I'm always trying to plug in because I want to free myself from that. I don't want it to hold me back.
What's Damon's role in that?
What's Damon's role? I got to figure out the role that I play in my problems. And you have problems that come up every single day.
Yeah.
Imagine if you just worked the steps. Well, I'll call them the steps one time. Imagine if I just worked the steps one time in my life when I was in prison and I never worked them again. I'd be carrying around all these problems that I have in life, all these resentments, all this time. That stuff gets heavy, man. Yeah. A bag full of problems, to carry it around, your bag gets bigger and bigger. It holds you back in life. So I would say to anybody out there that's got things to hold them back, look into a personal inventory. Work your personal inventory. Start off with the little problems first and work your way up to the bigger problems. It's almost like confidence. My buddy Ed Milet says confidence comes from the promises you keep to yourself. And in order for you to build on confidence, you have to start off with little promises that you make to yourself. Keep those little promises and get your promises going bigger and bigger in life. Mm-hmm. Same thing with your personal inventory. Start off with a small resentment. Start off with these little things. Those little things can become big things, though. So. Yeah.
Well, that's the whole purpose. I mean, the small turns into the big.
Absolutely.
Unless you're keeping your side of the street clean in a lot of situations, then you just be able to turn it off from time to time.
Push that broom, brother. Push that broom.
You had said over on the Savannah Chrisley podcast that everyone goes through a version of a SWAT team kicking in their door during their lives. What did you mean by that?
The SWAT teams from life, they come for us in different ways. And my life and my story is unrealistic for most people. Most people will never see a real physical SWAT team in their living room. Most people will never see 50 armed people come in with vests and guns drawn in their face and flashbang grenades going off. Not the reality. But a lot of people, I believe, will see the SWAT teams of life come for you in different ways. A SWAT team, divorce, bankruptcy, the loss of a job, the loss of a career, something happens to one of your kids. Something happens to a pet. You know, my pet, my dog Lottie is like a child to me, man. If something happened to Lottie, I'd be distraught. The SWAT teams of life come for us in different ways, but when the SWAT team comes, when these bad things happen in life, they're ushered in, what is the opportunity in that adversity? And you may not see it that day and right away. When I was laying on the floor on July 30th, 2008, with an AR-15 in my face and they're screaming, don't move, I didn't understand that these SWAT team coming in to get me weren't there to arrest me. They were there to rescue me. I didn't just get arrested that day. I got rescued that day. The SWAT team was like angels. They don't have wings. They have assault rifles and shields and helmets, and they're coming to the window. The SWAT teams of life are ushered in different ways, but that SWAT team might not be there to destroy you. Mm-hmm. It might be there to show the best version of you when you go through that adversity and you face the difficulty in front of you.
I'll be honest with you. My father, he's still in the hospital. You know, he took a fall last year, paralyzed, neck down.
Ooh.
And, you know, I'll tell you this right now, Damon. If I hadn't gone through the process that we're talking about right now, understanding who Aaron was on the inside, resentment, fear, done those living amends. My living amends to my father was always be there when called upon.
Yeah.
And now throughout this process, having an understanding of myself, I get to fulfill that living amends.
You get to. You just said it. You don't got to. You get to.
You get to.
You get to.
It's one of the most valuable things anybody's ever told me was they challenged me to do for one day, change things, change the philosophy of I have to do something to I get to do it.
That's right. You get to.
And it's that right there has completely changed my life because I realize it's giving the powerless power back. And it's kind of the opposite of like step one because we're talking about powerlessness, giving up power, but then you gain power from that. And that's a common thread that goes all the way through up to and including you need to have something to hold on to. You need to have something that's washing over you in order to take that fearless moral inventory of yourself.
And the power you gain is in the four things you control.
Yeah.
The power you gain is not in the world around you. You don't control other people and other places, other things, but you can't control you. And once you gain that power back, that's when the good stuff happens, man. That's when the big changes in life take place.
If I had not done that, I would not be sober today. I fully acknowledge that because I'd still be dealing with I might not be drinking, I might not be, smoking or shooting, drugs. I happen to like meth as well, as the audience here knows. But I wouldn't be happy. And if I'm not happy, joyous and free, as some might say as well, chances are I'm not going to be sober very long.
Yeah.
It's just not a reality. Like, why would we get sober to be miserable?
Yeah. You got to have your serenity, man. Your serenity is the most important thing. Guard it. I would tell people when you find the thing that brings you serenity, guard that, tap into that. Don't let someone take that from you.
How did you find that?
I mean, the 12 steps. I mean, I can't underscore how much the 12 steps has meant in my life, the work of the program recovery. But there's the thing, it only works if you work it. You can't. I talk to people all the time that say, well, the steps didn't work for me, or AA didn't work for me. And I was like, did you work the program? Did you have a sponsor? Did you work the steps? Well, no, I went to the meetings. Well, this stuff doesn't work by osmosis. You got to do the dirty work, man.
Yeah. What does faith without works is dead mean to you? Because it's not just in a popular recovery book, but it's in the Bible too.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, look, let's get into this. Faith without works is dead. Listen, man, I run into people all the time that call themselves Christians. That you want me to believe you're a Christian? Show me you're a Christian. Show me the stuff that shows up in red ink of the New Testament. Show me love, show me compassion, show me mercy, show me humility, show me grace to other people. And when someone wrongs you, show me that stuff that shows up in red ink that says, let he without sin cast the first stone. You want me to believe you're a Christian? Your actions will tell me whether or not you're a Christian. Oftentimes I can't hear what people are saying because their actions speak so loudly. And that's what I tell people all the time. Like, faith without works is dead. You have to live those words. You can't just say those words. But we run into a lot of people out there, a lot of people in this world around us right now. Mm-hmm. They talk a good game about something they think they are, their idealism, what they are. But in a lot of cases, you're not living up to those principles. Now, it's not my job to make you live those principles, but don't expect me to believe that you're something that you're not. And if you ask me my opinion, I will give you the truth. Because no one likes a hypocrite. But when you're a hypocrite...
We got to make t-shirts.
Yeah, hypocristian. So that's what I call... But that's the thing. Faith without works is dead. There's a lot of people that go around talking about being a Christian because that sounds really good in America right now. Show me you're a Christian. Show me the works of Christ. Because this guy lived a life where he lived by an example. And you can too. Mm-hmm. But that's a choice you make.
How can you find hope though? Because it sounds like, at least from what we're talking about now, we've established a baseline of like, we need to take action. There needs to be follow-up. There can't just be simple, oh, I'm making decisions, the three frogs out in a log,
yeah.
Metaphor there. But how can you find hope at the end of the day if you're living in a place where you feel like you're carrying so much weight? Or is that even attainable?
Yeah. Hope's... You ever seen the movie Shawshank?
Yeah.
The Shawshank Redemption, right? Mm-hmm.
That
movie's all about hope. And the movie's not even about Andy, it's about Red.
It's the biggest misconception.
So yeah, people think it's about Andy. Andy didn't need, the title of the movie, the Shawshank Redemption, the redemption part of the title was about Red. Red needed redeeming. Andy needed escaping. So Andy represents hope. None of those men in Shawshank have hope, but Andy has that hope, and he becomes the light in the darkness, right? And the last minute of the movie tells you the whole story. It's on the beach in Mexico. Remember the beach in Mexico in the movie Zihuatanejo, Mexico? That's what kept Andy Dufresne alive for 19 years. In the darkest of times, the worst of places, Andy could envision himself on a beach one day. And we all have that power, Aaron, but we forget to use that power sometimes. We forget to see ourselves in a better place when the times get tough. We start circling the drain. We start feeling sorry for ourselves. We forget to see ourselves past that moment, right? But that's what Andy could do, and that's where hope comes from. Hope comes from knowing that there's a better day ahead, that this moment that we're in right now is just a moment. It's not the rest of our lives, That's where hope comes from. The last scene, the last minute, tells you the whole story. Every sentence that Red says in this last 1 minute of dialogue starts off with the same two words. I hope. He tells you, I hope I make it across the border. I hope I see my friend again so I can shake his hand. I hope the Pacific is as blue as it was in my dreams. I hope. Last two words of the movie. Go watch it again, man. Red got his hope back. Yeah. Hope's the most important thing in the world. If you don't have hope, you have nothing. And it's like Andy said in that letter. Remember that rock wall Andy told him to go to, and he left that letter behind for Red where he find him? He says in that letter, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. Hope is essential. We all have to have hope.
Well, that's literally what you do to try to just crush people's lives, is you take away their hope.
Prisons are a hopeless place. And once there's a void of hope, negativity, evil, darkness fills the void. That's what happens when you have no hope. You allow the negativity, evil, and darkness in. Hope was our barrier to that. It keeps it all out.
So I take it you've done multiple inventories. It's not just a one and done process.
Do them all the time. I do them sometimes driving a car down I travel a lot. So I mean,
spot check.
Yeah, there's sometimes I get annoyed with people on airplanes and stuff like that. I mean, in airports, I'm traveling a lot. People are bumping into you. There's all kinds of different things that go on in the day. things you can't control. And I got to step back. I'm like, all right, Damon, stop. You're not, you're not living in your program when you're upset like that.
But after your first one, what was the biggest thing that you learned about yourself? What was the biggest takeaway after the first pass through?
That left to my own devices, if I get in that mindset of like being an addict again, I'm a manipulator, I'm a liar, I'm a cheat, I'm all the bad things that you think about in life, because that's what addicts do. We go after whatever we want in life, and when we're in our addiction and we start, you don't have to actively physically be using to be in that zone either. You can start,
Definitely.
like I said, it doesn't start with you. You don't just relapse one day. You relapse in your mind already. And so that's the scary part for me, is like, I've got to stay in this program recovery because I know Damon West. Damon West will go back to being that guy that got taken down by a SWAT team. And it may not be, it's not just going to be drugs or alcohol that sends me back. Whenever I'm saying this, I'm saying that if I stop going to my meetings, if I stop working my program recovery, I'm really afraid I would go back to living in prison one day. And it won't be a drink or a drug that probably takes me down. It could be something that life gets too good. Life can get too good, Aaron. You're like, hey man, look, I don't think I need to go to meetings anymore. Look how good life is right now. It's a very dangerous place for me to be. So I always try to remember that Damon West that took not just Damon down, but all these other people with him. Because when you go to prison, you don't go alone. You take a lot of people with you to prison. So I don't ever want to be that guy again. And that's why that personal inventory is so important for me, because the minute I can work through that and push it aside, I'm back in Serenity again.
Yeah, behaviors, I feel it's the relapse before the relapse. It's the emotional sobriety versus physical sobriety. It's the name of the game, because like I said, in conjunction with what we're just talking about, I didn't get sober to be miserable. I also, now that I am sober, I have an obligation to not be, acting the same way with my behaviors towards people. Moods are infectious. My father always says it. He says, that it's a moral obligation to be happy around other people.
Sure.
That's what my father has always said to me. And I always question him, and I said, what do you mean? He's like, well, moods are infectious. He's like, why do I have the right to shit on other people's parade?
Yeah.
Like, why do I have that right to do
But
that?
he's a coffee bean. He's telling you the principles of being a coffee bean.
Yeah.
Your positive body language, man. You either, Muhammad told me this, he said, you either infect a room you walk into with negative energy, or you affect the room with positive energy. You're the disease, the cure in every room you go into. Why would you be the disease?
Exactly. So what more have you learned about yourself, as you've continued to, multiple times? You said you've already touched on the first time you did the pass through about yourself, but as you're continuing to understand, because you seem like a guy who you always want to continue to understand what's going on, learn, remain teachable.
Yeah, I've learned that working the steps and working a personal inventory, it didn't just make me a better person. It made me a more aware person of the other people around me. And my sponsor told me, when I got out of prison, think about this, man, I was in prison for 7 years, 3 months, and 18 days. I mean, of course I was thinking about going out and dating again, right? I mean, it's been a long time, right? But my sponsor's like, you can't go out and get with a girl right now. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? You're going to tell me I got to wait 12 months? He said, no, you got to work these 12 steps. Here's why. He said, because once you get to the end of the 12 steps, you'll be a person that's worth being in a relationship with. And he said, not only that, you'll be able to plug your potential partner in to this program you're working and see if they're worthy to be with you. That was the thing I learned in life. I'm worthy too. Whenever we are in our addiction and stuff like that, sometimes we have a low self-worth. We loathe ourselves, right? The biggest resentment I had to overcome making these pass-throughs that you're talking about was the resentment I had against Damon West. That's the guy I was most mad at.
It's interesting you say that, because it's literally when I go back, and I do a nightly one. I got a gentleman helped me, and now I help other gentlemen, and we have a little group, and we put in our little inventories that we take, spot check ones at night and hold each other accountable. That's like a little thing that we do in our lives, and that's kind of like what you're referencing. It's like wanting to remain teachable, wanting to keep on a journey of self-discovery and whatnot.
I ask my question. There's questions I ask myself every night before I go to bed, and it's a page 80 something of the big book in AA. Was I a good person? What did I do today to put back in the stream of life? Do I owe someone an apology? I ask myself these questions at the end of every day. I'm working an inventory every single night when I lay my head on the pillow, because I don't want to take yesterday's problems into tomorrow. Now you just made your day harder. I mean, you didn't even start your day yet. Now you got all this crap you took with you from yesterday. So That's when I've got to work that stuff. Do I owe someone an apology? But more importantly, what I ask myself before I go to bed, do I owe someone forgiveness? That's the big one, man. You have to be willing to forgive everybody for everything they do to you, especially the people that never asked for. Remember what Ray told me when I got this thing with Snipes, you know? You got to forgive this guy, man, because when you have a resentment, it's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies, you know? It eats you up from the inside out. The person, the place, the thing that you resent, most of the time don't even know. And if they ever do find out, they don't care. But you do. And you'll care about it so much that you'll take the ship, you'll crash the plane into the side of the mountain over that resentment.
We've talked a lot about resentment, and like this is why I keep coming back to talking about the importance of taking a moral inventory, and like why I believe this is applicable to everybody, because, you know, once again, like how I shared, I feel like I'm a grateful, recovered alcoholic, recovered from a hopeless state of body and mind. But the grateful component to this is also something I don't think I've ever shared publicly, and I'll share it with you, is I'm grateful because everybody needs a program in life. I just happen to have had to shoot crystal meth, drink, and do all these things to find a program that's so unbelievably simple that if I just follow to the best of my ability, maybe I get a daily reprieve, and maybe my spiritual conditioning gets better. And maybe I get to live a happy, joyous, and free life. It's a crazy thought process.
Yeah.
But what about the rest of the world? How do we bring it to them? And that kind of brings me to your book, because tell us a little about this. Six dimes and a nickel.
It's my sixth book, and that's not why it's called Six Dimes and a Nickel, though. My sixth book, it's the best book I've ever written. I became a better storyteller over time. My first book was The Change Agent, my autobiography. This is another autobiography, but it's all the things that happen in life. But I wrote this book because, listen, I believe every human being should work the 12 steps by the time they're 12 years old. The program recovery that I happen to work, AA, remember, I'm not a spokesperson for AA, but I believe in these principles so much because I've seen what they've done in my life and I've seen what they've done in other people's lives. I wanted to find a way to share this with the world. But the thing is, like, a lot of people are not going to pick up a book about recovery if they're not an alcoholic or drug addict. Like, well, that's not for me. No, recovery is for you. Maybe you're not an addict, but recovery is for everybody. And think about the personal inventory thing that we spent so much time talking about today. That's for everybody, man, because everybody has resentments. You don't have to be a drunk or a drug addict to have resentments. Everybody's got them. We carry them around. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to write another autobiography, and this time I'm going to tell the story of my life, and I'm going to base each of these chapters of my life around these principles I've learned in life, principles of recovery. So the title of the chapter is a principle I live my life by. The body of the chapter is a story, how I learned the principle in my life. The end of the chapter is the application. How do you apply this in your own life? Principle, story behind the principle, application of the principle. It's a combination of a memoir and a self-help book. And by the time you get to the end of this book, you've worked the entire 12 steps. In fact, people that are in recovery that read this book, they're like, dude, you did it. You distilled down the 12 steps, all the principles of recovery, and you put it in layman's terms in a storyteller mode that by the time you get to this book, you've worked the steps. You understand how we work the steps if we're working a 12-step program recovery. I start the book off with that question. The book starts off with a question, which is a rare thing to do for a book. The question is, if someone took control of your life tomorrow, what's the first thing that would change? And when I get to the last chapter of this book, the last chapter where I build my mom a house and my property next to me, because my dad died a couple years ago, but my mom, who's always stood by me, she's there for me in my life. She comes to visit me in prison. I build my mom a house and I bring her in to live with me because now it's my turn to take care of my mother, you know. And I think that, you know, when the Bible talks about, you know, respect your elders, they're not talking about when you're a kid. They're really talking about when you're an adult and you got to take care of your parents one day. That's what I think respect your elders is really about. And so I had to come full circle in my life. And the book ends with me building my mom a house and that principle about turning darkness into light. And I end the book by telling the reader, I hope this book will help you when you've answered that question at the beginning. I hope the principles in this book will help you make the change in your life. Because that's what it's about. It's about taking action on change and changing the way you think in order to make that change. This book is the best book I've ever done. It's not a book to replace anything in recovery.
It's supplemental.
It's a supplemental. It's something you can read along with it, and it's something everybody can read because people love stories with certain elements, right? They get the underdog story in here, they get the sports story, they get the true crime, they get the prison, but they get the recovery story in there.
The best way I think I could describe it is sort of like when you have a Bible and a Bible study, you got your big book, you got 6 dimes and a nickel.
Sure. I go into that in there, like you know, your faith is important. Whatever religion, whatever faith you believe in, go into that whole hog, man. But if you need a program recovery on the side, you can run parallel tracks with that, because sometimes in life we need people that have been to hell and they're willing to go back to hell with us for a little bit to show us what it looks like again and walk you back out of hell. And you need to get around people that have been through some things you've been through. Whatever your malady is, whatever your addiction is, find those people, make that your village, and let them go with you through hell sometime and bring you back out so you don't have to go through it yourself alone. But 6 dimes a nickel, by the way, the title is 6 dimes in a nickel is prison slang for 65 years, which is what a jury gave me. Every 10 years a dime, every 5 years a nickel. Pretty catchy title.
I know this is a very long question, but how has everything that has happened made you, changed in the way that you handle situations now?
It's not a long answer. It's a very concise answer. I found out that everything in life is about the relationships in life that you build. And things happen to us, not for us, right? But when things happen to us, it's meant for us to share that with other people. Like the coffee bean, Muhammad didn't give me the story of the coffee bean just so I could become a redeemed man. And I have become a redeemed, by every metric, Aaron, I'm a redeemed man. I'm a husband, I'm a stepfather, I'm sober, I'm a philanthropist, I'm a very successful businessman, college professor. I went back to school and got a master's in criminal justice and started teaching at University of Houston, a class called Prisons in America. The only professor on the planet to teach a prisons class who lived in prison. Every metric in the world out there, I am a redeemed man. But he didn't give me the coffee bean just so that I could redeem myself. He gave me the coffee bean so I could help redeem him and redeem other people. And that's what the coffee bean was about. I had to come back and find Muhammad once I got out of prison and redeem him, because he was a guy that had a lot of potential in life, but drugs and alcohol, he never found a program recovery. He never got to the steps. He never got to the principles like we got. And so whenever I got out and I found him and I found his family, I understood that more. The thing about that I've understood about life, it's never about you. It's about the impact you can make for others. And that's what life is all about. When I die, what I want on my tombstone, 2 words: servant leader. That's it. That's all I need. If I can live that, Aaron, that's working that living amends.
I feel like we're a bit of kindred spirits here together, because like I said at the beginning, I've been a fan of yours for a while now.
It blows me away, man. I appreciate that too.
The messages and the way you're able to explain things to people is, I feel the same as you in a way, where I have an obligation now. When people ask me, oh, why are you even doing American Recovery? Why do you do this show? Well, I've been given a voice. I've been given a gift. Who am I to say no?
Yeah, that's it.
So to kind of wrap this all up and put a nice bow on it, what is one thing that we may have left out or that we touched on but not heavy enough that you need people to hear?
You are responsible for the change in you. No one else is going to do it for you. No one's going to come wake you up. No one's going to come save you. There's no Calvary coming for you. You are the Calvary in life, and you have the power inside you to change the world around you. And every single day, you have to be able. In my life, I compare anything difficult that happens in life to my time in prison. Every day that I wake up and my feet don't hit the cold concrete floor of a prison cell, Aaron, I'm winning. And everybody has that experience in life of what a bad day looks like. I would tell people, define what a bad day is. The marriage failing, the job is lost, the something happens to your kids, something happens to your pet. These are bad things. The SWAT teams. Define what a bad day looks like. Compare the days that you were struggling and say, hey, is this really one of those bad days or just a day that's not so good? And once we do that, we can pull ourselves out of this abyss that we get into in our daily lives. And you have to be able to do that because you are in control of what your day looks like. And you have the power, anytime you want, any time of day, to change your day and start it over. Don't ever forget that. That's what I tell people all the time. Don't ever forget. You can start your day over anytime you want. 9 o'clock in the morning, noon, 4 p.m., having a bad day, hit the pause button. Take a step back, take a deep breath, and tell life, I'm not going to live like that. I'm not going to be the carrot. I'm not going to be the egg. And then you run and jump on the pot of boiling water and tell that pot of boiling water, I'm a coffee bean. Turn it up. I got this.
Well, thank you so much, Damon, for coming by. We're going to include the links for your book and any social medias in the description of the video down below. So if you guys are watching this now, audience, check it out. Check out the book. Go check it out.
Yeah, and if you want to find me for speaking or anything like that, it's at damonwest.org, DAMONWST.org. That's how people find me to book me to speak. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Damon.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate you, brother.